We have the funds to help give us the buildings for our district. We will not have the funds in a couple of years to help us actually operate our district.
My understanding is that you want to hear more about the McCleary decision and how it impacted school funding, especially here in Ellensburg. And I think the story that we'll tell wouldn't be that much different than what Andrew Perkins would probably say in Thorpe and Mike Nolan in Kittitas. We were all pretty much affected similarly by that decision. So I'm going to pass the mic to Brian and let him start out, and then we'll probably tag team a little bit as we go through it.
Thank you, Ginger. Again, my name is Brian Aikin. Thanks for the invite here, and I also want to personally thank all of you for all your help in registering voters. You played a vital role in us passing our bond last year. It was a close vote, just over 62%. I'm not sure what happened without your help and effort. So thank you all very much for what you did. And I know a big emphasis of yours at the time was to sign up Central Washington students, and that really made a big difference in the end too. So again, thank you very much. Unfortunately, there's not quite enough handouts for everyone, so our apologies for that. We'll be happy to send you the file electronically after if you'd like. But again, maybe what we can do is we're all what we call, and we talked about it today in cabinet, we're all a little bit McCleary weary, where we've talked about it so much and we've spent so much of our time and energy trying to understand it and to know how it's going to affect each of us, and all 294 school districts are similarly affected, but the idea and the premise was good. You know, we all have a constitutional right, all school districts, for a stable and ample system of funding for our schools, and as you all know, that wasn't happening primarily because of the high reliance on local voters' levies. And you know, voters' levies required, for the longest while there, they required 60% supermajority to pass, and when 20 or more percent of your school district's funding is tied to a levy that you need 60% of your constituents to vote for, that's not a very stable source of funding, and so the system was flawed in that respect. The idea behind McCleary was less reliance on voters' levies, more reliance on the state, and provide more of that stable funding mechanism. So, in principle, it was a great idea, and the state Supreme Court did their very best to oversee the solution. The execution of it was not as successful as we hoped, and you know, we can summarize this document for you and just. But at our level, the way we look at McCleary, we were all taxed 80 cents a thousand approximately or more on our property taxes to pay for the cost of McCleary. And that extra money was meant to fund additional teacher salaries, additional staff units, basically to cover the basic education responsibilities that we were funding out of levies. And you're not supposed to be doing that, but we were all doing it because there just wasn't enough money. So the problem was for us here in Ellensburg is we received extra money from the state, just about $4 million, but on the back end we had our levy reduced from approximately $7.2 million down to roughly $4 million, and so we received green dollars in one hand and lost blue dollars in the other hand, and in the end we were maybe funded for a small COLA but no additional cost. But what has transpired over time was there's such an emphasis to raise teacher salaries and then for each individual district to be competitive with the neighboring district, and the end result was all of those dollars and then some went into funding our teacher and classified salaries. And you know, we're pleased that we could pay our teachers and our classified staff and retain quality employees. The mechanism of the funding, however, is now going to work against us, as all of those dollars went into recurring salaries and benefits. They did not go into replacing the money that was lost in the form of our levy. And you know what makes Ellensburg so special is we value arts, we value our band, we value our music programs, we value our sports and athletic programs, as well as we hire additional nurses over what the state is funding, additional teachers, we have great class sizes. All those things make Ellensburg a special place to go to school for kids. The levy that's being used to fund those things is now under a great deal of pressure, because most of those dollars are now going to have to start going to salaries and benefits. And so that's not only the challenge that we face moving forward, it's the challenge that all districts are going to face moving forward. Part of the McCleary settlement was, besides limiting our levy to $1.50 a thousand or $2,500 a student, we were capped at $1.50 a thousand because of our assessed value, and so we couldn't by law go over that. So that's what dropped us from the $7.2 million down to roughly $4 million a year in levy funds. Other districts didn't get that same limitation because they either had a really high assessed value and they were able to capture $2,500 per student. And to put that in perspective, if we had an assessed value of roughly twice what our $2.5 billion is district-wide, so if we were at $5 billion or more, we could have qualified for the $2,500 per student, which at 3,200 students would have brought in well over $8 million. And so there are districts in the state that are able to now levy more funds, and they have the taxable base to do that, and we're not able to do that here in Ellensburg. So right there it kind of set us at a little bit of a disadvantage. And then some of the other components in the funding mechanism were, if you were in a high cost of living area, you were given up to an additional up to 18% increase in your basic education funds, and we got zero. Even though we all think it's expensive to buy a house here. I think it's expensive to buy a house here. We're not that far from Seattle. Those costs are beginning to spill over into our area. But we didn't get any extra funding from the state there. So there are districts that got as much as 18 to some were grandfathered in as high as 24% additional funds as a result of that. And then the other thing McCleary did is it took funding away based on the experience level of your teachers. And so roughly half of our teachers, 49% of our teachers, are at either 16 years and master's degree or higher. And so we have a very experienced teaching staff, and in the past, the more experienced your teachers are, the more funding the state would give you, because they would average all of our teachers' experience and credit levels and then create what's called an average mix factor, and then they would pay you based on what that average mix factor is. The state stopped doing that with McCleary, and now they just fund us all at an average of roughly $66,000 a year. And so for those of us that are above that number, we pay out roughly $74,000 a year, because that's where our experience and teaching level is of our instructional staff. We're right back into paying more out than what we get in from the state. But there are districts that have a really low staff mix, and now they're getting more money from the state than they're actually paying. And so they can afford to go to the bargaining table and do more for their teachers than we could. So when you look at the execution of the McCleary decision, that's where it's flawed, and unfortunately we lost out on all accounts. Ginger, we lost out on staff mix, we lost out on the levy lid, we lost out on the cost of living because we weren't grandfathered and some things like that. And so all of the extra money we received went into our salary schedules. So we have enough fund balance. Our board was visionary, and our superintendent was smart enough to, let's put money away, let's give ourselves some time to figure this out. So they were smart enough to build a large enough fund balance to get us through the next couple years with making targeted adjustments and reductions as they come up. For example, if we know we're overstaffed in one certain area and we get a retirement, we're going to have a discussion about whether we fill that position or not, so there's not harm created in the system and we're not hurting kids. So we're looking at those opportunities as they arise. It still doesn't get us past the challenge we're going to face in a couple of years of how do we make up $1 million or so out of our fund balance and not not hurt our band programs, not hurt our sports and things like that. And so that's a collective challenge that we all have. And we're no different than other school districts. We just seem to really get hit.
We'll talk
pretty
about
hard.
SEB too.
Yeah, and then of course the other thing, the state and their desire to create a cost-effective medical and health program for state and school employees created what's called SEB. That stands for School Employees Benefits Board. And the idea there is to negotiate contracts from a statewide basis, and then all schools would then be required to join. And so, unlike the past, when we could go out and we could negotiate our own contracts and hire our own brokers to build our own benefits programs, we can no longer do that as of January of this coming year. The unfortunate thing is that it's again in the execution of it is I'm still struggling to find how that's an efficiency gain, because now where if you have a full-time employee, they qualify for full-time benefits.
Part-time.
If you have a part-time employee, they qualify for prorated benefits. So if they only work a half a day, they qualify for a half time worth of funding from the state towards their benefits. What the state decided was SEB, that anybody that works 630 hours or more per year now qualifies for full-time benefits. And that also applies to substitutes. And requires us to track those hours and then go back in time and then pay for full-time benefits. Even if the employee elects not to take medical, we still have to pay the state. And so we calculated the cost out of pocket for Ellensburg at another $1.4 million that was unfunded.
Unfunded.
So the challenge for us is how can that be an efficiency gain statewide when the state had to pony up $300+ million to cover part of the cost of SEB, and then individual districts have to now come up with more money out of our own local funds to complete the process. And so that's kind of where we are. We are in a good place now. We have time to work on solutions and time to work with our community to prioritize what we think is important to us. We also have time to continue to lobby our state, and that's where our efforts need to be, is help us fix this. We went to a town hall meeting and we listened to all three of our reps speak, and every one of them said, had they known then what they know now, they wouldn't have voted for McCleary because they didn't see the negative impacts it was going to have, particularly on Ellensburg. So that's kind of the skinny on McCleary. Is there anything you want to add?
The other thing is, of course, our major source of funding is enrollment, and our enrollment right now in Ellensburg is pretty steady, pretty flat, not really going up, slightly down a little bit with our kindergarten numbers. We're hopeful that we're building 2 brand new elementary schools. We've moved forward on the progress of building one of the K-5 schools on the Weiniger property, which is Helena and Cora up in that area just north of where Mount Stewart currently sits. And we're also going to be building a brand new Mount Stewart building just north of the current Mount Stewart, which we're super excited about, and then remodeling Lincoln. And so our hope would be that as we open up the 2 brand new schools and do a remodel of Lincoln, that it will attract some more students to Ellensburg and to our schools, so that our enrollment would go up, so that we could kind of weather through some of the years that are coming when our funds will be decreasing, because about 80.3% of our total general budget is in salary and benefits, which we think is important, and we value our employees. And we have got to have some of these mandates that are coming from the state, like SEB, we need them to be funded. They did increase some funding for special education, but we still, how much we spend? $500,000 out of the general budget to fund special education, which is really important. We need to be able to support those students, but we need more funding from the state and always from the federal government to help cover those costs. So appreciate the League of Women Voters and whatever we can do to partner with you to reach out to our legislators. I know they're coming, we're going to a legislative dinner December 10th, and I know they're going to do another town hall here with our legislators in December through the chamber. So questions that you guys have?
Brian, did I hear you correctly that at the end of your comments you said our current legislators did not understand the impact that would have on Ellensburg?
Yes, that would be true. We were at a town hall meeting here at the city hall, and all of them said, had we known how that was going to be executed, that they wouldn't have supported that, because it resulted in us, in the end, more salary obligations but less funding, and I don't think that was the original intent.
So when you guys were in Olympia several times, you weren't interacting with them, or?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, we did.
And what part of that did they not understand?
Well, we even had Jamie can attest to this. We had a sit down with Superintendent Reichdahl, and he looked us in the eyes and he said, "You guys are just you're just caught in the middle. You're a loser, and there has to be losers in this. We couldn't have everybody be winners, and we just went." Right? That's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective was they were just trying to they had to close up McCleary, and none of them wanted to raise their hand and be the one to throw the curveball. We were painting the picture for them.
Well, I'm not surprised, but I'm appalled.
No, it is. It's frustrating, and it's really frustrating to hear that in a public forum. They then, no, of course, what the cynic can be said, of course that's what they'll say, but, oh, we didn't realize it was going to do this. We painted that picture very clearly for them.
Thank you.
Well, and the thing that we are concerned about as a board and a leadership team is we value our teachers. We went through the process. It was a difficult process. The elephant in the room is we got to the day before school and almost had a strike, which was just devastating for all of us, because we value the process and the job that our teachers do in it. And shame on them for putting us in the situation to put us on opposite sides of the table, when always in years past we've been able to work together and work out solutions. That was a little bit disheartening.
So what can the league do to help the school?
I think if we could fix one thing, and that maybe because the legislators of McCleary weary, it would be to bring that staff mix back with 49% of our teachers being at 17 years or more experience, most of them with masters plus 90, which starts at 70,000 up, and we're only getting 66,000 for those teachers. It would really be to work with legislators to say they need to give us money towards, and not be penalizing school districts that have more experienced staff, because we value the fact that, that's amazing, and it's a huge strength for us that we have more teachers that are experienced, and the state needs to bring that back and help pay for that.
Well, as a follow-up to that, so
Can you use the mic for the questions?
Yeah.
sorry, are the school districts that really got hurt by this ultimate rollout, are they working on a legislative fix? In other words, not just talking to our legislators, but is there some bill you're going to get behind that we can also get behind, or have we got that far yet for lobbying in Olympia?
So the state superintendent, WASA is the organization, right? And WASDA is the school director. There's no bill that I know of. I do know that legislators are going back right now to look at the prototypical model, which is the model they use to determine how much money they're going to give you towards staff. And that is very broken, in my opinion, especially coming from a state that funded very differently, which had its own share of issues as well. But right now, we're not even fully being funded for the number of teachers and number classified that we have. Brian, do you want to talk to him about
Sure.
this?
Brian, before you go on, I want to jump from that.
Yeah.
I wanted to wait for Charlie to finish. We were talking about part of the problem is funding salaries. Am I right in understanding that? And you were somewhat unhappy. Well, it was unfortunate for the fall that we had this division between staff and administration and salary. Although I know you and the board really want to pay your teachers adequate salaries. You don't want people working for less than what they should be. But McCleary has always been difficult. It's not been easy, that's why it's been kicked around. Where is the money going to come from? It's one thing to say the state ought to give us more money. But I understand if you don't have more money in taxes or some form, you can't just have it up here. So it's not just that people don't want to give money. There's a problem with how we're doing stuff. Folks on the west side, their tax bills went up. Ours went down because of McCleary. So we talk about winners and losers. You talk to some of those east side people whose property taxes went up $5,000 to $6,000 in 1 year. Carnation, $13,000. So everybody's hurting on McCleary. I'm not sure what your proposal is to do, except, yeah, we need more money. You surely don't want to take money for health care from your employees. You know, that was a good thing about McCleary. But where do we get the funding? What ideas are you proposing going forward?
Well, that's a great point, and the case in point is the legislature. Our concern was the legislature is going to say, oh, okay, now this is so far out of control. We're going to then boomerang back to the voters and allow you to raise higher levies again, that's not a solution that we would propose. I mean, we made a promise to our voters to stay at $4.50 a thousand or less for our debt, for our capital levy, and for our general fund levy, and we are at or under that. And by the way, we're building 2 brand new schools and remodeling Lincoln, and so we are at our promise to our voters, and we wouldn't propose going back and boomerang above that. And this November, I think there are 5 districts in the state that went out for a supplemental levy. Remember I said that we could be capped at $1.50 a thousand, and now the state, their fix was, well, let's raise that up to $2.50 a thousand and let districts raise higher levies again. So we're going right back to the problem that we were in and asking you to pay for more taxes to fund schools. One that I know of passed at 52%, and 2 were just under passing, and 2 went down badly, and I think the voters are sending a pretty clear message that, you know, enough is enough, that the McCleary fix was supposed to fix this, and it was supposed to stabilize taxes. You don't fix it now after the fact by saying, okay, districts, you can go right back to your old practice of raising high levies again.
Is there a coalition in Olympia that has worked with the bipartisan level to focus on solutions?
Yeah, and I think so. I think so, and they don't look at it that way. They look at, there's a page in your handout that's included that shows, for example, we have a requirement to have students with health plans, that students that have health issues are required to have a health plan in every one of our school buildings. Yet, and those health plans are required by the state of Washington. So we, in essence, have nurses in every school. The state funds 0.47, not even a half of a nurse, and in what's called the prototypical model. So when you talk to your legislators, you can say, I understand why you're doing a prototypical model to fund staffing. It needs to be realistic. If you value the safety of children and you want us to have health plans, you need to fund a nurse in every school. 0.47% of one nurse for our entire district of 3,200 kids makes no sense to me. And when you look at this, how many students it takes to fund those kind of staffing, that doesn't make any sense. And so a couple of things you can ask them to do. If you're going to have a prototypical model, well then, don't you think you should properly fund that? Where the money comes from, that's a challenge we're all going to have.
Brian, do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Sure.
So just a few things too, I think great point here on funding of, are we gonna have to raise taxes to get the money? But I think part of it too is balancing who's getting the money. I think that's where it feels like out of the full pot of money across the state of Washington, that perhaps the right mix might not have been hit. So I think there's a fix there that doesn't necessarily include raising new taxes or finding new income for the state. It's just maybe Seattle School District gets a little less and a little bit more to support over to Ellensburg, for example. So there's a balance piece there too. And then I just want to be really clear that it is in the toolkit, and what they're saying is they don't want to go that way, but we can increase the local levy. And that is something that the district made a promise to voters that we would not do during the bond, but that's still out there. So I could envision, you know, a few years down the road that that might become a really big issue here in our community that we're all going to have a conversation about. But we did, when we were in Olympia, we went and spoke with representatives outside of our district. So we spoke with Lori Dolan, who's a representative out of Olympia, who's a huge champion for education and funding it appropriately. And so there are people that are trying to kick around some minor fixes over there in Olympia that we could potentially get behind. But again, the Weary McCleary kind of feel is very large in Olympia, and nobody's really wanting to mess with it. But the power I think we have is our 3 representatives from District 13. We've got to make this an issue. I mean, personally, I feel like these are the questions we need to be asking at forums, because if we care, then they're going to start to care. And I would say they brushed us off last year in Olympia because they didn't think voters really cared about it. They thought, yeah, here's a parent, here's a superintendent, here's, you know, Brian, the business director, sitting here saying, you know, help us. But they weren't getting a coalition of a huge amount of citizens from District 13 saying this is a big deal. So I think most immediate what we can do is stand up in these town halls and start talking to our 3 representatives in District 13 and say we care about it.
And the thing is that
It's on. You want me to hold the
but one of the things is that the league, our league, Washington State,
Use the mic.
one of the
You sound nice and powerful.
Thank you.
Do it.
one of the cornerstones is that is education fully funded. That's been one of our principles for a long, long time. So what we're talking about today as far as programs going forward for next year, everything we've said today is exactly what League has been saying. Washington State must fully form K-12. So we're ready to go on.
Okay, good job.
Thank you.
So hard. Am I still on?
She turned it off.
Turn it on. Okay, now it's on, good. So then,
No.
it's not. It says green.
Doesn't matter, he told me to speak into it.
Okay, now it's green, okay. So one of the things that would be important for us to understand is what does the prototypical school district have, you know, in really practical terms. Because the way the funding is set up is it's set up for that prototypical school district. My sister teaches in the Renton School District. I have friends who teach in the Seattle School District. The Seattle School District actually adheres to that nurse ratio, so does Renton, which means that their nurses run all over the place in order to serve their students. And so the question is that if we want to go outside of the prototypical, if we can't get them to change that, if we want to go outside of it, then that would be the rationale for asking for more money in the levy if that's the ultimate thing you have to do. But the people have to understand what prototypical means versus what we have, and then you have to make sure that the people who are your constituents really agree that we like this better. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I am saying I like band and art music too. I'm not. But that is the funding, and the superintendent could have done it a different way. He could have said there are winners and losers. But one thing I will say for a state employee to say that, for him to actually acknowledge the truth of that, took some guts to say that to school districts. And so when we're talking about having trust in government, we want people to say the truth. Well, that is the truth, and we did lose. And so sometimes it's important that if people say the truth, even if we don't like it, we still need to support that.
And make sure you speak in.
Has there been any movement to galvanize the parents of students who are currently enrolled, because they have the most, immediate impact on this, and maybe listened to more closely by legislators? And I think the parents have more power than just organizing senior parties. I think there's a wealth of involvement there that maybe could be galvanized to change this.
I'll run it back.
Well, as as we talked about what our future is in our future, we know we're going to have these discussions as a community, and we know that it's going to have budget implications, and we're not forced to go into crisis mode tomorrow. We have time to work through this process and look at how we develop our budgets and listen to, what do we value? If we have to do less of what we're doing, well, what do we value the most, and make sure we're keeping those things that are valued the highest by our community. And plus, we have time to get this thing fixed. I think the thing that's going to cause this to get fixed is it's created the haves and the have-nots, which prior to 1977, when Judge Duran ruled that there was an unequitable funding mechanism, they put in place the staff mix factor and levy equalization assistance, so wealthy tax districts could raise all kinds of money and pay for everything they wanted, but those in the poorer tax districts could not. We kind of went backwards and away from that, and I think they're going to have to realize that we didn't hit the mark with McCleary and make adjustments, and I think that's going to happen, and I believe that will happen, because legislators, they're smart people, and they're going to see what we're facing, and I can understand them being McCleary weary, and they're used to us going to them every year saying, we need more money, and they kind of get tired of that. But I think where we are right now, having played this out, it's pretty clear that there needs to be somewhat of an adjustment. And I agree with you that there can be room for an adjustment. So.
Anything else? Any more questions?
Is this the smaller school districts? It's not, I listen to you talk, but most of what you're saying relates directly to Ellensburg School District. But we have a lot of small schools around here that suffer greatly, and always feel that nobody pays any attention to them, particularly in this McCleary thing. So, I don't know. You want to say something? You want to say something? I think it's a shame that the small schools. We have a lot of them, and I was part of one for a long time, so I kind of speak firsthand there. But some of the little schools, you look at a school like Easton, that sits out there all by itself, and they feel their board says, whatever happened to us? Everybody talks about Ellensburg. Well, you've got a lot of kids that are outside of Ellensburg. Also, we have a lot of student teachers that we need to support that come out of this college. And nothing seems to be directed at them. They want everybody to have 16 years of experience and some kind of a master's degree or something. So I think that's hard on the students. It's hard on us. It's hard trying to keep teachers here. That's my comment.
Anyone else like to speak?
I appreciate you bringing up the student teachers, and we definitely, in our hiring practices, go for the most highly qualified candidate. And the most highly qualified candidate, sometimes it's people with the most experience, and sometimes it's our brand new teachers. I know that we have hired in the recent past some teachers that did their student teaching that just hit the mark for what we were looking for. Yeah, and it is a huge advantage for us, I think, having the university here. I'm just very appreciative of all the interns and all the opportunities that we have to not only give their students experience, but also to benefit from them and their new ideas. So I appreciate you
We
bringing
just
them
need to take advantage of it.
up. Absolutely.
Right.